Simon Peter then, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave, cut off his right ear, and the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put the sword into the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? I want to read to you a part of this blog post that I contributed to. And I just want to read this to you because I can't put it any better than this. So I want to read this to you. Simon Peter in John 18 knew that an unjust arrest was imminent. And although Jesus was the one that was being unfairly arrested and murdered by the state, Peter became more incensed than him and with a sword cut off the ear of a soldier. We must learn, in order to be a good ally, that our anger cannot surpass the anger of those that we are becoming an ally and advocate for. This is not our rodeo, and it's not our story to tell. We are there to make room and support or amplify the voices of our marginalized Black and brown friends. Jesus was leading the movement, and Peter had pledged to follow. Know this, we as white people are not called to be the voice and the face of this movement. We can empower and fuel and encourage and sacrifice, but more than anything, we need to take cues from the Black community and follow their lead. I'm going to continue in a moment. I found a quote from Mark Twain, and it says this: wisdom comes from a lifetime of listening when you'd rather be talking. If you want to become wise and you want the currency of wisdom in your life, when you feel like talking, teach yourself to listen. When you feel like you have something to say, especially during this time, this is important for us. Those of us that have not experienced this personally, we need to do way more listening and way less talking. Because I promise you, we don't have an accurate picture. Continue on with this story. Jesus looked at Peter and told him to put the sword away. We need to lay down our swords and pick up the heads of the lowly and oppressed in our city. Peter's miscues and missteps along the journey of change did not stop here. He failed and he missed many moments along the path like many of us today. He went on to deny his very relationship of the leader of the movement 3 times. He thought he was being culturally relevant when he had never stopped to consider the inequalities and closed doors that he was blinded to because of his birthright and privilege as a Jew. If you remember, he was the first disciple to preach to the Gentiles, and he had the Gentiles there, and he didn't even consider at the time that the Holy Spirit would fall on them. And so we can be preaching, we can be quote unquote inclusive, but are we really seeing past our inherent birthright and bias, our privilege, to really pay attention, to make sure that things are equal, and where there is inequality and injustice, they're being addressed? Because we can have inequalities like Peter had before his very eyes. He didn't even think that the Holy Spirit would fall on these Gentiles. He didn't even think about it. And when the Holy Spirit did, he looked around like, oh my gosh. And I think many of us today are in that situation with Peter where we're going, oh man, I thought this was a good thing. I thought that, I've got a Black friend. We had a Black president. I have this, I have that. I thought we're doing a good thing here. But you don't realize that even sometimes in that complacency of doing like you do this much and you think that you've done something great, but you don't realize that in that place we become complacent and we become anesthetized to realizing that there is some really big things that people are being kept out of because of the color of their skin. There's some really big things in our society that we have free access to that is so much more difficult for somebody who has a different skin color. And we have to see that together. We have to realize this is a real thing. But there is hope for you and I, because Peter missed the moments. He turned his back. He was culturally blind. And yet once awakened, he became the cornerstone of reconciliation between 2 cultures. And he built a model for inviting all to experience and receive the same treatment. Peter literally screwed up time after time after time, and yet Peter and the model of bridging the gap between Jew and Gentile is still being looked at today for how we can begin to bring people groups together that disagree, or people groups together that aren't culturally generally the same.